The Los Angeles County Courthouse stood like a giant stone fortress in the heart of the city, its tall columns and wide steps giving it an air of old-world power. On this Tuesday morning, April 3rd, 2025, the place was alive with noise. Lawyers in sharp suits rushing through the halls, clerks juggling stacks of papers, and the faint hum of nervous chatter from people waiting for their day in court. Inside courtroom 204, one of the biggest rooms in the building, the air felt heavy with anticipation. The high ceilings and dark wood walls made every sound echo, from the creak of the benches to the shuffle of feet. Today was no ordinary day, and everyone inside could feel it. Judge William Harrington sat behind the bench, his white hair catching the light like a crown. At 64, he'd spent 30 years ruling this courtroom with an iron grip. His piercing blue eyes, framed by wide glasses, scanned the room over the edge of his notes. He wasn't a man who smiled much. Known in legal circles for his sternness, he had little patience for rookies or anyone who didn't respect his rules. His voice, deep and gravelly, could silence a room with a single word. Even the best lawyers in LA felt a shiver when they stood before him. That metallic edge to his tone, it wasn't just authority, it was a warning. Harrington flipped through the thick file in front of him, his lips pressing into a thin line. The next case on his calendar wasn't just another contract dispute. The clerk's voice cut through the quiet. Case number 8476, McGregor versus Pacific Heights Construction. A lawsuit about a broken deal and some shady business moves. The judge's frown deepened as he read the name of the plaintiff, Conor McGregor. The Conor McGregor, the Irish UFC legend, the brash fighter who'd knocked out opponents in seconds and trash-talked his way to global fame. Harrington adjusted his glasses. This wasn't your typical courtroom player. What made it even stranger? McGregor had ditched his usual team of fancy lawyers and decided to fight this one himself. The judge leaned back in his chair, his mind already spinning. In his 3 decades on the bench, he'd seen plenty: crooked CEOs, desperate small-timers, even the occasional celebrity. But a world-famous fighter stepping into his court without a lawyer? That smelled like trouble. Harrington had a theory about people like McGregor. Fame made them think they could waltz into any arena and win. He'd seen self-represented plaintiffs crash and burn too many times, rich or not, famous or not. The law didn't care about swagger. It cared about rules, evidence, and cold, hard facts. And Harrington? He lived for those rules. The double doors on the side of the courtroom swung open, and in walked Thomas Bennett, the lawyer for Pacific Heights Construction. Bennett was a big name in corporate law, a guy who'd spent decades defending companies with deep pockets. His dark gray suit fit him like it was custom-made, which it probably was, and his silver hair was slicked back just enough to look effortless. He carried a leather briefcase, his steps steady and sure, like a man who'd walked this path 1,000 times. His face said it all: confidence, maybe even a touch of boredom. This was his turf, and he knew it. He nodded to the clerk and took his spot at the defense table, setting his papers down with a quiet thud. Then came the main event. The big doors at the back of the room opened, and Conor McGregor strode in. The chatter in the courtroom, soft whispers from the handful of observers and staff, stopped dead. He wasn't in fight gear today. No shorts, no gloves, no wild grin. Instead, he wore a dark green suit, sharp as a blade, with a crisp white shirt and a deep red tie. The green was a nod to Ireland, his home, and it made his presence pop even more. His short, sandy hair was neat, but that famous McGregor strut was still there, shoulders back, chin up, like he was stepping into the octagon, not a courtroom. In his hand, he carried a slim stack of folders, held tight like a weapon. A few people couldn't help themselves. "That's him," someone muttered. "The Notorious," another whispered. It wasn't every day you saw a sports superstar up close, let alone in a place like this. Court staff craned their necks, and even the clerk paused to sneak a glance. McGregor didn't flinch. He walked straight to the plaintiff's table, set his folders down, and stood tall, hands clasped in front of him. If he felt the eyes on him, he didn't show it. This was a man used to being watched. Harrington banged his gavel once, a sharp crack that snapped the room back to order. "Silence," he said, his voice low but firm. The murmurs died instantly. His blue eyes locked onto McGregor, studying him like a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. There was curiosity there, sure, but also a flicker of doubt. Mr. McGregor, he began, his tone dry as dust. I understand you've chosen to represent yourself in this proceeding. Is that correct? McGregor stepped forward, his Irish accent thick but clear. That's right, Your Honor, he said, his voice steady. I've looked at this case inside and out. I'm ready to handle it myself. His words hung in the air, bold and simple. No hesitation, no nerves, just the same fire he brought to every fight. Harrington raised an eyebrow, not even trying to hide his skepticism. He'd heard that kind of confidence before, usually right before someone tripped over their own ego. Mr. McGregor, he said, leaning forward slightly, this court runs on strict rules. You being a successful athlete doesn't give you any edge here. No special treatment. You're up against a legal team with years of experience and resources you can't imagine. Do you understand that? Bennett smirked from his table, a small twitch of his lips. He liked where this was going. McGregor, though, didn't blink. I understand, Your Honor, he replied, his tone calm but firm. I'm not asking for favors. I just want a chance to show the facts and the law. That's all. The judge sat back, adjusting his glasses again. He didn't say it out loud, but he was already picturing the mess this could turn into, a loudmouth celebrity floundering in a world he didn't belong in. Harrington had seen it before, big names thinking their charm could out-talk a contract. But something about McGregor's steady gaze made him pause. Maybe this wouldn't be the disaster he expected. Very well, he said, his voice clipped. Let's proceed. Mr. McGregor, you've got 15 minutes to make your opening case. McGregor nodded, reaching for his folders. The room held its breath. Judge Harrington leaned back, arms crossed, ready to watch what he was sure would be a train wreck. What he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Conor McGregor was about to step into this fight with the same grit and smarts that made him a champion. And in the next 15 minutes, he'd start turning heads in a way no one saw coming. The courtroom was dead quiet as Conor McGregor stood at the plaintiff's table, his dark green suit catching the light. Judge William Harrington's sharp blue eyes stayed locked on him, waiting. The old judge had just given him 15 minutes to make his case, and you could feel the weight of that ticking clock. Thomas Bennett, the slick lawyer for Pacific Heights Construction, sat back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He figured this was going to be easy, a famous fighter stumbling through a legal mess he didn't understand. But McGregor? He looked calm, like he was about to step into a fight he'd already won in his head. Harrington cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the silence. Mr. McGregor, I've warned you. This court doesn't bend for anyone. You're facing a team with decades of experience. You sure you're ready for this? McGregor didn't flinch. He stepped forward, hands resting lightly on his stack of folders. Your Honor, he said, his Irish accent rolling out clear and strong. I don't expect the rules to bend. I don't want special treatment. I've studied this case, and I'm here to show the truth. That's it. His tone wasn't cocky, just steady, like he was stating a fact. A few people in the back of the room shifted in their seats, leaning in. Harrington's eyebrow twitched, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded. Go ahead, then. McGregor opened his top folder, pulling out a neat stack of papers. He didn't rush. He moved like he had all the time in the world, like he was setting up a punch he knew would land. Your Honor, he started, his voice firm. This case is simple, even if the other side wants to twist it up with fancy words. Back in December 2022, I hired Pacific Heights Construction to build a youth training gym in Dublin, Ireland, my hometown. It's a place for kids in rough spots, kids who need something to keep them off the streets. We signed a contract, and I've got it right here. He held up a thick document, flipping to a marked page. It says 3 big things: top quality materials, a finish date in 12 months, and independent experts checking the work. He handed a copy to the court clerk, who took it with a quick glance at the colored tabs sticking out. Red, blue, green, all organized like a pro. I paid them $3 million up front, McGregor went on, pulling out a bank transfer receipt. Exhibit C, Your Honor. That's the proof. They got the money, and they started building. But 6 months in, my team, guys I hired to watch the job, found problems. Big ones. He paused, letting that sink in, then turned to a small screen set up by his table. With a click, a photo popped up, cracked concrete foundations, rusted steel beams, stuff that looked like it belonged in a junkyard, not a gym. Look at this, he said, pointing at the screen. These pictures were taken by my independent supervisor, a structural engineer named Sean O'Malley. His report's in here too, Exhibit D. He says the concrete's too weak for Dublin's ground. It's a shaky place, needs strong stuff. The steel? It's cheap, nowhere near what we agreed on. This isn't just cutting corners. It's breaking the deal we signed. The photos flipped one by one, each with notes in bold. Below standard, seismic risk, contract violation. The room stayed silent, but you could hear a few sharp breaths from the crowd. Harrington leaned forward, his glasses slipping down his nose a bit. He'd expected McGregor to ramble, maybe throw out some loud complaints with no meat behind them. But this was sharp, clear, backed up with papers and pictures. The judge scribbled something on his notepad, his face still hard, but his eyes narrowing with interest. Bennett shifted in his seat, that smirk fading fast. He hadn't seen this coming. McGregor kept going, his voice steady but picking up heat. I gave them a chance to fix it. I showed them the evidence, asked what was going on. First, they said it wasn't true. Then they claimed it was adjustments they had to make. But here's the thing, Your Honor. Our contract, Clause 17.3, says any change like that needs my written okay. They never asked. Never got it. They just kept going, using junk materials, thinking I wouldn't notice. He tapped the contract page again, his finger landing on the exact line. It's all right there. The judge flipped through the copy the clerk had handed him, finding the clause. His pen scratched across his notes again. McGregor wasn't done. He clicked the screen, and up came a drawing. A bright, clean sketch of the gym he'd planned. This isn't some rich guy's toy, he said, his voice dropping lower, more serious. This gym's for kids in Dublin. Kids like I was, growing up with nothing but trouble around. It's got training mats, classrooms, a safe place to go. I'm not letting a company cheat them out of that. These materials? They're not just bad, they're dangerous. If that gym falls apart, it's those kids who pay the price. A murmur rippled through the room. A couple of court staff nodded, caught up in it. McGregor's words hit hard, not just the facts, but the why. He wasn't yelling or showboating. He was laying it out, piece by piece, like he was building a wall no one could knock down. So here's what I'm asking, he said, turning to face Harrington straight on. 1. End the contract, they broke it. 2. Give me back my $3 million, plus interest. 3. Pay for the delay, because every day this drags on, those kids lose out. That's it, Your Honor. He stepped back, closing his folder with a soft snap. The clock said he'd used 14 minutes. Harrington sat there, staring at him, his face unreadable. Inside, though, the judge was rattled. He'd braced himself for a loudmouth celebrity tripping over big words. Not this, a fighter who'd walked in with evidence, rules, and a story that stuck. Bennett coughed, adjusting his tie, clearly thrown. The room buzzed quietly as McGregor sat down, his green suit still sharp, his eyes still locked ahead. Harrington tapped his gavel once, light but firm. Time's up, Mr. McGregor, he said, his voice gruff. That was thorough. It wasn't a compliment. Not yet, but it was close. He turned to Bennett. Mr. Bennett, your opening statement. You're up. The lawyer stood, smoothing his jacket, but the air had shifted. McGregor had landed the first punch, and everyone knew it. What they didn't know was how much more he had in him. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker as Thomas Bennett rose from his seat, smoothing his dark gray suit. Judge William Harrington's gavel still echoed faintly from McGregor's opening, and the air buzzed with quiet tension. Bennett, the big-shot lawyer for Pacific Heights Construction, had that cool, practiced look, like a guy who'd talked his way out of worse messes than this. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, and his voice came out smooth, almost too smooth. He was ready to take McGregor's case apart, piece by piece, and he figured it'd be easy. After all, what did a fighter know about law? Your Honor, Bennett began, nodding to Harrington with a slight smile. Mr. McGregor's put on quite a show. I'll give him that. But let's be real. This is a complicated construction project, not a cage fight. He's thrown around some pictures and papers, but he doesn't understand the technical side. Building's messy. Things change. The adjustments Pacific Heights made, they're standard in this business. We hit unexpected snags on the ground in Dublin, and we adapted to keep the project alive. That's not breaking a contract. That's making it work. He paced a little, hands clasped behind his back, like a teacher explaining something obvious. Those materials he's complaining about? Sure, they're not the exact ones in the contract, but they're still solid, still safe. Industry pros do this all the time when plans meet reality. Mr. McGregor's acting like it's a crime, but he's out of his depth. He's a fighter, not an engineer. He's got no business judging what's good enough for a job this big. Bennett shot a quick glance at McGregor, his smirk creeping back. We'll show the court the full picture, technical reports, expert opinions. This was reasonable, necessary, and above board. Harrington scribbled a note, his face still a stone wall. He'd heard slick arguments like this before. Bennett was good, no question. The judge's eyes flicked to McGregor, waiting. The fighter sat there, arms crossed over his green suit, his face calm, but his jaw tight. He didn't look rattled. If anything, he looked ready to hit back harder. Mr. McGregor, Harrington said, his voice low and sharp, you've heard the defense. How do you respond? McGregor stood up slow, like he was savoring the moment. He grabbed his notebook, small, black, scribbled with notes from Bennett's speech, and stepped forward. Your Honor, he said, his Irish accent cutting through the room. With all respect to Mr. Bennett, he's trying to dodge the truth with a fancy story. I figured he'd say this. Oh, it's normal, it's complicated, you wouldn't get it. But I've got proof that blows that excuse apart. He flipped open a folder and pulled out a thick report, holding it up. Exhibit F, geological studies done before we signed the contract. Pacific Heights got these, read M, signed off on M. They show the ground in Dublin, every detail. No surprises, no snags. They knew exactly what they were dealing with. He handed the report to the clerk, who passed it to Harrington. The judge flipped through it, his pen tapping the page. McGregor kept going. Clause 17.3 in our deal says any change to materials needs my okay in writing. They didn't ask, didn't tell me. They just swapped in cheap junk and hoped I'd miss it. That's not adapting. That's cheating. His voice stayed steady, but you could hear the edge, same fire he brought to a fight. Then he dropped the hammer. And here's the kicker, Your Honor, he said, clicking the screen. Up came a string of emails, black text on white, projected big for everyone to see. Exhibit G, internal messages from Pacific Heights, dug up legal and proper in discovery. Listen to this. Client won't notice the switch till it's too late. Margins up 20% with the cheaper stuff. That's their own words. Not about snags or safety, about profit. They planned this from the jump. A gasp rippled through the room. A couple of observers whispered, heads shaking. Bennett's face went pale, his hands freezing mid-gesture. He hadn't seen those emails coming. Not like this, not laid out so clean. Harrington leaned forward, peering at the screen, then at the printed copies McGregor handed over. The judge's pen scratched fast now, his skepticism cracking. McGregor didn't stop. They say I don't get the technical side. I don't need to. I've got experts who do. Sean O'Malley, structural engineer, says this concrete's a joke for Dublin's shaky ground. It's not just below our deal, it's a risk. And this isn't about me flexing, Your Honor. It's about those kids. He clicked again, and the gym sketch came back up. Mats, classrooms, a safe spot in a rough neighborhood. Every day they stall. Using this garbage, those kids lose out. Some might not make it. Streets'll take them. I grew up there. I know. The room went quiet again, heavier this time. McGregor's words weren't just facts. They hit like a punch to the gut. Harrington's face didn't change, but his eyes stayed on the fighter, sharp and focused. Bennett coughed, shifting in his seat, his cool slipping. He stood up fast. Your Honor, he said, his voice tighter now. Mr. McGregor's claims are overblown. Those emails. Out of context. And swapping materials. It's standard when you hit real-world problems. He's got no proof it's unsafe, just some photos and a loud story. Harrington turned back to McGregor. Mr. McGregor, your response? McGregor grinned. Just a flash, quick and sharp. Out of context? The full emails are in Exhibit G, Your Honor. Read M yourself. No excuses hold up. And unsafe? O'Malley's reports got numbers. Concrete's 28% too weak for a seismic zone. That's not a story. That's math. He tapped his folder. They signed a deal. They broke it. Simple as that. Harrington flipped through the emails, his brow furrowing. The evidence was piling up, clean, tight, undeniable. He'd started this day expecting McGregor to flop, a cocky celeb out of his league. Now, the fighter was landing hits. and Bennett was reeling. The judge tapped his gavel. "Enough for now," he said, voice gruff. "Mr. Bennett, your full statement's next. Be ready." Bennett sat down, jaw clenched. McGregor took his seat, eyes still burning, like he was studying an opponent's next move. The room buzzed, whispers, gasps, a few nods. Harrington hit it well, but inside, he was hooked. This wasn't the train wreck he'd bet on. This was a fight, and McGregor was winning. The courtroom felt different now, like the air itself had thickened. Judge William Harrington banged his gavel once, sharp and quick, calling a 20-minute break after McGregor's last jab at Bennett. The crowd spilled out into the halls, buzzing with chatter. Lawyers, clerks, even a few random onlookers couldn't stop talking about the fighter who'd just dropped a bomb with those emails. "Did you see Bennett's face?" someone whispered. "McGregor's no joke," another said. In his office, Harrington sat alone, frowning at his notes. 30 years on the bench, and he'd never seen a day start like this. He'd pegged McGregor for a loudmouth who'd crash fast. Now, he wasn't so sure. Back in courtroom 204, the clock hit 11:20, and everyone filed in again. The benches creaked as people settled, leaning forward, eyes darting between McGregor and Bennett. The fighter sat at his table, green suit still crisp, flipping through his black notebook like he was prepping for round 2. Bennett, across the room, kept his face smooth, but his jaw was tight, and his hands fidgeted with his pen. Harrington swept in, robe swishing, and took his seat. "Let's continue," he said, adjusting his glasses, his voice like gravel. "I've got questions." He turned to Bennett first, his blue eyes narrowing. "Mr. Bennett, those emails Mr. McGregor showed, your client's own words, say they swapped materials to boost profits, knowing it broke the deal. You called it out of context. Explain that. Were these just chats, or did they call the shots?" Bennett stood, clearing his throat, his slick confidence wobbling. "Your Honor," he said, measuring his words, "those emails were early talks, technical staff tossing ideas around, not final orders from the top. They're just pieces of a bigger picture. If you saw everything, months of reports, meetings, it'd show the real challenges we faced on site. Ground conditions shifted, costs spiked. We had to adjust." Harrington raised an eyebrow, his pen hovering. "So you're saying there's more context that justifies this? You've got that handy." Bennett hesitated, just a beat too long. "Not exactly, Your Honor," he said, his voice tighter. "I mean, those emails, they're bits of complicated talks. A non-expert like Mr. McGregor could read 'em wrong. We're pulling more records to show the full story." The judge's lips pressed thin. "Not exactly," wasn't an answer he liked. He turned to McGregor. "Mr. McGregor, your take?" McGregor stood, slow and steady, like he'd been waiting for this. "Your Honor," he said, his Irish accent ringing clear. "Bennett's fishing for excuses, but there's no bigger picture that saves him. Those emails. I didn't cherry-pick him. Exhibit G's got the whole chain, every word, start to finish. I invite you to read it all. It's crystal. They planned to cheat, banked on me not noticing. No ground shifts or challenges, just greed." He slid a thick stack of printed emails to the clerk, who passed it to Harrington. The judge flipped through, his eyes scanning fast. The room held its breath. McGregor kept going. "They signed off on geological reports, Exhibit F, before we started. No surprises in the dirt. They knew the job, promised the best, then used junk. That's not adjusting. That's lying." Harrington scribbled, then looked up, his tone sharp. "Mr. McGregor, your case is tight for someone with no law degree. How'd you pull this off? You got help you're not telling us about." His voice had an edge, half impressed, half suspicious. McGregor didn't blink. "No secrets, Your Honor," he said, calm as ever. "When I took this on, I gave it 3 months, 6 hours a day, every day, studying. Contract law, building rules, court cases like this one. Same way I trained for a fight. Focus, no shortcuts. I called experts when I needed 'em. Engineers, not lawyers, but the work's mine." He paused, then added, "Folks think fighting's just fists. It's not. It's brains, strategy, memory, reading the other guy. I brought that here. Different game, same rules." A murmur rolled through the room, soft, but real. People nodded, caught off guard. Harrington's pen stopped, his eyes locked on McGregor. That answer hit different. It wasn't just about the case. It smashed the idea he was some dumb brawler. Even Bennett shifted, his cool slipping more. The judge didn't let up. "Let's get technical," he said, flipping to the contract. "You say the materials violate seismic rules for Dublin. Prove it." McGregor grinned. Just a flash, then clicked his screen. "Right here, Your Honor. Dublin's shaky, earthquake zone. Rules come from international standards, sections 18.4 and 20.7. Minimum strength for public buildings. My expert, Sean O'Malley, tested their concrete and steel, 28% below those limits. Not just my contract, illegal under public safety laws." He handed over a report, Exhibit D again, with charts and numbers circled in red. Harrington studied it, his frown deepening, not at McGregor, but at the facts. 28% below, he muttered, then looked at Bennett. "Counselor." Bennett jumped up, flustered now. "Your Honor, this is a Dublin project. Why is a California court even hearing this?" "Jurisdiction's shaky." Before Harrington could speak, McGregor cut in. "Page 43, second paragraph, Your Honor. Contract says disputes go to California courts, under California law. We negotiated it, initialed it. Clear as day." He tapped the page, showing the signatures. The judge checked it. There it was, inked by both sides. His pen scratched again. The room shifted. Observers leaned closer, whispers picking up. Bennett sat down, jaw clenched, out of moves for now. Harrington kept his face blank, but inside, he was reeling. He'd expected McGregor to flop, some loud celeb playing lawyer. Instead, the fighter was quoting clauses, citing laws, and running circles around a pro. After 3 decades, this was new. "We'll break for lunch," Harrington said, banging his gavel. "Back at 2 o'clock. He stood, robe swishing, and headed out. The crowd erupted, quiet at first, then louder. "He's killing it," someone said. "Bennett's toast," another laughed. McGregor sat, scribbling in his notebook, calm as ever. Harrington, in his chambers, stared at the file. This wasn't over, but McGregor had him hooked. The clock struck 2 o'clock sharp when Judge William Harrington strode back into courtroom 204, his black robe flapping like a storm cloud. The Los Angeles County Courthouse had been buzzing all through lunch. Whispers about Conor McGregor's morning knockout echoing in the cafeteria and halls. Now, the room was packed again, benches groaning under the weight of extra onlookers who'd squeezed in. The air crackled with tension. McGregor sat at his table, green suit still sharp, munching the last bite of a grilled chicken salad he'd brought. Fighter's fuel, even here. Across the room, Bennett huddled with his team, their hushed voices tight and fast, throwing glances his way. Harrington banged his gavel once, silencing the chatter. "Let's get to it," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. He'd spent the break digging into the Dublin building codes McGregor had mentioned, and his notes were thick with scribbles. He adjusted his glasses, peering at Bennett. "Mr. Bennett, your client says the material swaps were in acceptable tolerance margins. Mr. McGregor's reports show a 28% drop below specs. Explain that gap." Bennett stood, smoothing his tie, looking more polished than he had before lunch. His team had clearly prepped him hard. "Your Honor," he said, his tone steady again. "The contract specs were sky-high, way above any legal minimums. We adjusted to practical levels, still safe, still solid. Industry standards allow flex when costs or conditions shift. That 28%, it's often inflated baseline, not a real danger line. We stayed within global norms." Harrington's eyebrow shot up. "Which norms exactly?" "Name 'em." Bennett paused, just a hair too long. "General industry standards, Your Honor," he said, his voice a touch weaker. "Common practice for projects like this." "That's not specific," Harrington snapped, his pen tapping hard. "I asked for standards, codes, sections. You've got nothing." His tone was ice, and Bennett flinched. McGregor raised a hand, calm as ever. "Can I clarify, Your Honor?" "Go ahead," Harrington said, turning to him. McGregor stood, clicking his screen to life. "Your Honor, I've got it right here, Exhibit H." Up came a table, neat and color-coded. Green for contract specs, yellow for legal minimums, red for what Pacific Heights used. This compares 3 things: what we agreed on, what the International Building Code says, Section March 2nd, 47 for seismic zones, and what they actually built with, tested by labs. Look at the numbers. Concrete's weak, steel's flimsy. Not just below my deal, way under the code. Unsafe by law. not just by me. Harrington leaned in, studying the screen. The table was clear as day, green numbers high, yellow in the middle, red way down. You checked this with more than one lab? He asked. 3, Your Honor, McGregor said, pulling out reports. Annexes I and J, 2 extra labs, same results. I didn't mess around when I saw how bad it was. He handed the stack to the clerk, who passed it up. Harrington flipped through, his frown deepening, not at McGregor, but at the mess Pacific Heights had made. Bennett jumped up. Your Honor, the sampling. How'd he even test this? Could be flawed methods, bad data. McGregor didn't blink. NXH's got the protocols, international forensic standards, all followed. Chain of custody's there too. It's rock solid. He slid another folder over, cool as ice. Harrington skimmed it, then set it down. Bennett sat, his argument fizzling. The judge wasn't done. Let's talk procedure, he said, his voice low. Mr. McGregor, you asked for an injunction, stop the work now. That's tied to the danger in delay rule, right? Explain why that fits. Bennett smirked, figuring this was it. Some tricky legal bit to trip the fighter up. McGregor didn't hesitate. Your Honor, it's Periculum and Mora, danger and delay. Precedents Pacific Construction versus Hernandez, 2008. When building's so bad it risks falling apart, you don't wait. Court steps in fast to stop harm. My evidence, labs, emails, shows this gym's a hazard. Kids could get hurt. That's irreparable damage, right there. The room went still. Harrington's jaw tightened, his pen frozen. A 2008 case, nailed on the spot? Bennett's smirk vanished. McGregor kept going. NXK's got more. 10 years of California cases, same rule, same result. It's consistent. He slid that over too. Bennett stood, desperate now. Your Honor, he's exaggerating. A few months' delay on a charity gym. It's not irreparable. No one's dying over this. McGregor fired back. Wrong, Your Honor. NXL, study from University College Dublin. Every month, without safe spaces like this, kids in that area get pulled into crime, cartels, gangs. Stats show it. Violence spikes when there's nowhere to go. This isn't just bricks. It's lives. He clicked up graphs, lines climbing with delays, dropping with sports programs. Hard numbers, no fluff. Harrington stared at the screen, then the study, silent for a long beat. The human angle hit, but the legal backbone held it up. Tight, clean, unbreakable. He'd seen good lawyers miss details like this. McGregor? He'd brought it all. We've heard enough today, the judge said, his voice heavy. I'm taking this under review. Preliminary ruling on the injunction tomorrow, 10 a.m. He banged his gavel, standing fast. The room erupted, whispers turning to loud chatter as Harrington swept out. He's got it locked, someone muttered. Bennett's done, another said. McGregor sat, scribbling notes, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. Bennett's team huddled, voices low and tense, throwing looks his way. In the hall, the buzz grew, lawyers texting, clerks gossiping. McGregor had turned a sideshow into a slugfest, and he was ahead on points. Harrington, in his chambers, sat with the files spread out. He'd expected a quick win for Bennett, a lesson for McGregor. Now, the fighter's prep, his evidence, his smarts, it was rattling him. This wasn't over, but one thing was clear, McGregor wasn't playing. He was fighting to win. By the next morning, Wednesday, April 4th, 2025, the Los Angeles County Courthouse was electric. Word of Conor McGregor's courtroom beatdown had spread like wildfire, and courtroom 204 was stuffed to the rafters. Lawyers with no stake in the case nabbed seats, just to watch, their briefcases tucked under benches. Reporters, legal ones with notepads, sports ones with cameras, lined the back, whispering about the fighter who'd turned law into a contact sport. The clock ticked toward 10 o'clock, and the air hummed with hype. What had started as a curiosity was now the hottest show in town. At 9:45, McGregor walked in, cool as ever. His dark gray suit, different from yesterday's green, fit him like a glove, and a pair of tiny shamrock cufflinks glinted on his wrists, a nod to Ireland. His sandy hair was neat, his stride steady, like he was strolling into a press conference, not a legal showdown. He carried his stack of folders, setting them down with a soft thud, then sat, hands clasped, eyes forward. No swagger, no grin, just focus. The crowd watched him, some nudging each other. He's got this, a young lawyer muttered. Minutes later, Bennett and his team rolled in, Bigger now. 2 extra suits tagging along, faces grim. Pacific Heights had called in backup, clearly spooked by yesterday's thrashing. Bennett's silver hair was still perfect, but his tie was a little off, and his hands fidgeted with his briefcase. His crew whispered fast, papers shuffling, as they took their spots. The vibe was off. They weren't just prepping, they were scrambling. Everyone stand. The clerk barked as Judge Harrington swept in at 10 o'clock on the dot. His white hair glowed under the lights, his robe billowing as he climbed to the bench. Punctuality was his thing, and he didn't mess around. "Good morning," he said, sitting down, his voice rough but steady. "I've gone through everything, documents, evidence, arguments. I'm ready to rule on Mr. McGregor's request for preliminary measures." The room went dead silent. Bennett tensed, his pen frozen. McGregor stayed still, his face unreadable. Harrington adjusted his glasses, glancing at his notes. "This case digs into tricky stuff. Contracts, international building rules, cross-border projects. But Mr. McGregor's evidence stands out, and it's strong." He paused, letting that land. First, 3 independent labs, NX's D, I, and J, say the materials Pacific Heights used are way off. Concrete's weak, steel's flimsy, structural risks, no question. Second, those emails, Exhibit G, aren't just talk. They show a clear plan to cut costs, break the contract, and hide it. That's not a mistake. That's intent. Bennett scribbled fast, his face tightening. McGregor didn't move, but his eyes flicked to the judge, sharp and locked in. Harrington kept going. Third, the danger in delay argument, periculum in mora, hits hard here. Mr. McGregor tied it to real harm. Kids in Dublin losing a safe space. Backed by a solid study from University College Dublin, NXL, delays not just money, it's lives at risk. That's compelling. He looked straight at McGregor, his tone shifting. "Mr. McGregor, I'll be frank. Your work here's been sharp, meticulous, technical, clear. I don't see self-represented folks handle this kind of case like that often. Rare, even." A murmur rippled through the room. Surprise, awe, cut short by a quick gavel tap. "So, here's my call," Harrington said, voice firm. 1. The injunction's granted. Pacific Heights stops all work on that Dublin gym, effective now. 2. I'm ordering a full inspection. Court picks the experts to check every inch of what's built. That's it for now. Bennett shot up, his cool cracking. "Your Honor, with respect, this guts my client. Serious financial damage. We asked to pause this while we appeal." Harrington didn't blink. "Denied," he said, sharp as a blade. "The evidence, structural flaws, safety risks, is too strong. Public danger beats business losses. Appeal if you want, but the injunction holds." Bennett sat, jaw clenched, his team exchanging panicked looks. The judge turned to McGregor. "Mr. McGregor, you've won this round. But the main fight, damages, the rest, keeps going on schedule. Anything for the record." McGregor stood, slow and steady, his voice low but clear. "Just this, Your Honor. Thanks for hearing me out, really digging into the facts. This isn't about me. It's about those Dublin kids counting on that gym. Today keeps that promise alive. I'm grateful. Simple, straight, no showboating, just the truth." Harrington nodded, a rare flicker of warmth crossing his stern face, then banged his gavel. "We're done." The room exploded as he left, chatter, gasps, a few claps. Young lawyers swarmed McGregor, shaking his hand, grinning like fans. "That was unreal," one said. "You smoked him," another laughed. Bennett and his crew bolted, heads down, no words. In the crowd, a woman watched, middle-aged, thoughtful, scribbling notes. Catherine Morrison, dean of UCLA's law school, had slipped in after hearing the buzz. She'd come curious, now she was floored. An idea was brewing, one she'd never have dreamed up yesterday. McGregor grabbed his folders, slipping out through the chaos. The hall turned into a circus, reporters shouting questions, lawyers texting updates. "McGregor's a beast," a clerk said, shaking his head. "Legal KO," another chimed in. Back at his table, he'd left one thing. A single page from Annex L, the Dublin study, open to a graph. Crime spiking without safe spaces. It wasn't just a win, it was a mission. Harrington, in his chambers, sat with a coffee, staring at the files. He'd ruled fair, but McGregor had shaken him. A fighter with no law degree, outgunning a pro like Bennett? That stuck. The case wasn't done, but the prelim was McGregor's, and the old judge knew he'd just seen something special. Out there, the world was about to find out too. The Los Angeles County Courthouse was still buzzing as the afternoon sun dipped low on April 4th, 2025. Conor McGregor's win in Judge Harrington's courtroom had lit a fuse. By lunchtime, legal blogs like Law 360 were dissecting his evidence, while sports sites like ESPN splashed headlines. From Octagon to Order, McGregor's legal upset. The Los Angeles Times didn't bury it in the back. It led the front page. Conor McGregor's courtroom knockout. Reporters swarmed outside, mics ready, but McGregor slipped past, true to form. No interviews, just a short statement through his assistant. This wasn't about me. It's about the Dublin kids getting a safe gym. Thanks to the court for hearing the facts. 3 days later, McGregor was holed up in his temporary LA spot, a sleek, low-key house in Beverly Hills. The place had a gym in the basement, a nod to his roots, but today he was in the study, surrounded by papers. The Pacific Heights case wasn't done. Damages were still on the table, and he was prepping for the next round, scribbling notes in his black notebook. His phone buzzed. "Boss," his assistant said, poking her head in, "you've got a call. Catherine Morrison says she's the dean of UCLA's law school. Wants to meet. Today if you're free." McGregor's eyebrows shot up. "Law school dean? What's she want with me?" He leaned back, curious. "Tell her 5 o'clock. Here." The assistant nodded and ducked out. McGregor glanced at his watch, 2:30. He shrugged, turning back to his files. A dean didn't call every day, but he'd hear her out. At 5 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. McGregor opened it himself, still in a crisp white shirt and jeans, no suit today. Catherine Morrison stood there, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, with a briefcase and a warm but serious smile. "Mr. McGregor," she said, extending a hand. "Thanks for seeing me on short notice." "I'm honored. Pleasure's mine," he replied, shaking her hand, his Irish accent thick. "Come in. Coffee." She nodded, and he led her to the study, a leather sofa and glass table waiting. "Gotta say, this is new. Deans don't usually drop by. What's up?" He grinned, half joking, as he handed her a mug. Morrison laughed, settling in. "Fair point. It's not every day a UFC champ takes down a corporate lawyer in front of Judge Harrington and wins big. I was there, you know. Saw the whole thing." She sipped her coffee, eyes gleaming. "I went in curious. Left blown away." McGregor tilted his head, modest but intrigued. "Thanks, but I'm no lawyer. Just did what I had to for the gym." "That's exactly why I'm here," she said, leaning forward. "Your prep, your clarity, it wasn't just good, it was rare. I've got an offer." She pulled a folder from her briefcase, UCLA's logo stamped on it, and slid it over. "We want you to do a lecture series at our law school. Strategy and prep, lessons from fighting to litigation. Not the legal nitty-gritty, that's not your thing. But how you think, how you tackle a challenge like that. Our students need it." McGregor opened the folder, scanning the plan, dates, topics, a pitch about transferable skills. He looked up, surprised. "Me? Teaching? Never saw that coming." He chuckled, rubbing his chin. "I've never stepped in a classroom like that." Morrison smiled. "That's the point. You're not some textbook professor. You took fight smarts, planning, studying your opponent, staying cool, and turned it on a courtroom. That's gold. Our kids are drowned in theory. You'd show him how to do it. Face the impossible and win." He leaned back, thinking. You know, people see fighting as just swinging fists. But it's hours breaking down tapes, knowing every move, adapting on the fly. Guess that's not so different from what I did here. He tapped the folder. "Still teaching? That's wild." "Exactly," Morrison said, excited now. "Excellence isn't stuck in one lane, it's a mindset. You prove that. And it's not just about law, it's about pushing limits." You could shake him up. McGregor nodded slow, gears turning. "There's something else," he said, voice dropping. "Could mean a lot for kids like me, Irish, Latino, folks who don't see themselves in places like UCLA. Showing them they can step up wherever they're from. That matters." Morrison's eyes lit up. "You're right. I didn't even think of that angle. Representation's huge. You'd be a beacon for them." She paused, then went personal. "One thing, if I can ask, how do you master all that law stuff in 3 months? Our best students take years for that." He grinned, leaning in. Same way I won titles. 6 hours a day, no breaks, reading, memorizing, digging into contracts, cases. Called engineers for the tech bits, but I put it together. Discipline's the key, and knowing why I'm in it. Those kids. That's the fuel. He tapped his temple. Fighting's head and heart. This was too. She nodded, impressed. That's what I want them to hear. Think it over. I'd love to have you. The talk stretched an hour. Formats, ideas, dates. McGregor got into it, sketching out how he'd tie fight prep to court prep. When Morrison left, he walked her out, promising an answer soon. Watching her car pull away, he stood there, hands in pockets. A case to save a gym had cracked open something bigger, a chance to shift how people saw him, and maybe how they saw themselves. Back inside, he flipped through the UCLA folder again. From Dublin streets to the Octagon, now this? He smirked. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, and he'd always been good at hitting him. Months later, the main auditorium at UCLA's School of Law was packed to the brim. It was a crisp fall evening in 2025, and every seat was taken, students scribbling in notebooks, professors nodding along, even a few LA lawyers and judges squeezing in. They were all there for the last of Conor McGregor's 8-part lecture series, Strategy and Prep, Lessons from the Cage to the Courtroom. What started as a wild idea from Dean Catherine Morrison had blown up, sold-out sessions, simulcast to other schools, and a buzz that made it the talk of California's legal scene. Tonight was the finale, and the energy was electric. McGregor stepped onto the stage, no folders this time, just a mic and a screen behind him. His navy suit was sharp but simple, his shamrock cufflinks catching the light. He moved with that same quiet swagger, like he was sizing up a fight, not a room of brainiacs. In the front row sat Judge William Harrington, stern as ever, his white hair gleaming. He'd come at Morrison's invite, a big deal considering how he'd first doubted McGregor. Now, he was here to see what the fighter had built. Meticulous prep isn't just smart. It's your duty, McGregor said, his Irish accent filling the space. He clicked up a diagram, 2 columns, one for fight training, one for his legal case. In the cage, I study every punch, every dodge, hundreds of hours so I can react fast. In court, I broke down that contract, those codes, same way. Improvising? Only works if you've built the base first. Students scribbled fast, some grinning. They'd said in earlier talks how his real-world take cut through the dry stuff they usually got. He paced, voice steady but alive. Last thought before questions. My whole life, people set limits on me. Kid from Dublin with a funny look, too scrappy for the big leagues. Fighter who's all muscle, no brain. Then some guy walking into a courtroom with no law degree. Every time, I hit walls folks thought I couldn't climb. He stopped, locking eyes with the crowd. Here's the truth. The toughest walls are the ones you let stick, the ones others slap on you, or worse, the ones you buy into yourself. Real freedom's picking your own path. The room erupted, claps, cheers, even Harrington's hands joining in, slow but real. McGregor nodded, stepping back as hands shot up for Q&A. A nervous first-year stood. Mr. McGregor, what's your advice for a challenge everyone says you can't beat? He smiled, leaning in. Break it down, small bites. No one builds a house in a day. It's brick by brick, steady and sure. And don't fear falling. It's not the end, it's a lesson. Every slip gets you closer if you learn from it. The kid sat, beaming. Another student, Latino with a shy grin, went next. How do you deal with people judging you in court? Like your accent, your background. We worry about that too. McGregor's face softened. Judges are everywhere, he said, blunt but warm. You don't wait for him to vanish. You prep so hard they can't ignore you. I saw Harrington's shock when I hit him with cases and codes. That wasn't for show, it was for the gym, the kids. Purpose matters as much as the work. He glanced at Harrington, who nodded, a flicker of a smile breaking his stone face. Students swarmed after, snapping pics, asking tips. In a corner, Morrison sidled up to Harrington. What did you think, Your Honor? She asked, curious. He paused, picking his words. 30 years judging. I've seen sharp lawyers, tons of them. But explaining tricky law this clear, this easy? That's a gift. Surprised it's him? Months ago, yeah? Now, I'm surprised I ever doubted. Bias hides as wisdom sometimes. It's a trap. Nearby, McGregor chatted with a knot of Latino and Irish students, their accents thick like his. They grilled him, law, fighting, breaking into spaces where they rarely saw their own. You don't ask permission, he told him, voice low. You show up, do the work, take the spot. For them, he wasn't just a champ. He was proof they could stretch past the lines drawn for him. The Pacific Heights case had wrapped 2 months back. A settlement, full payout, new builders on the Dublin gym. It was nearly done now, safe and strong, just like he'd fought for. But that first hearing? It had sparked more than a fix. It showed brains could jump fields, that grit wasn't stuck in one game. Harrington, once ready to school him, now praised his mark on law. Students saw new roads. McGregor? He'd turned a fight for kids into a push for anyone boxed in by expectations. As he said bye to the last group, dishing out prep advice, he paused by the door. The gym was the start, a need to protect. Now it was this, a chance to light fires in heads like his. He smirked, stepping into the night. From Dublin streets to UFC gold, then a courtroom win. Now this, a legacy bigger than any belt. Limits? He'd smashed him, and he wasn't done. And that's a wrap, folks. Conor McGregor's wild ride from the octagon to the courtroom, and then to a lecture hall, is done. 8 segments, over 8,000 words of grit, smarts, and a fighter proving he's more than just fists. Hope you loved it as much as I loved spinning it out for you. Big thanks to every one of you for sticking with this story, reading, feeling the punches, and rooting for the Dublin kids right alongside McGregor. You're the real champs here. If this tale hit you in the guts or got your brain buzzing, smash that like button. It's the nod that keeps these stories coming. And if you want more wild rides like this, hit subscribe. We've got plenty more where this came from. Tales of underdogs, big wins, and breaking all the rules that say you can't. What did you think? Drop a comment. Love it. Hate it. Want a sequel? I'm all ears. Till next time, keep fighting your own fights, whatever the arena. Cheers.